Hello and welcome to another Agritecture webinar with one of our amazing innovators that we're featuring on the blog. Agritecture is a blog all about urban agriculture and local food. And today we're branching out a little bit to explore a little bit more about food waste and waste relating to the food system. So while we mostly focus on production, today we're expanding and broadening the topic. I'm Henry Gordon-Smith, the founder of Agritecture, and I'm here with my colleague Scott Mattis, who I've been working with over the past year to produce content and help us with the blog. Scott, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do?
Sure, thank you, Henry. So yeah, I've been with Agritecture for about a year now. I've been our blog editor pretty much since the first couple of months. And that's everything from interviewing people to write content. You might have seen my recent Islands of Innovation article, quite a few before that. In addition, you know, Agritecture, we always accept submissions as posts for our blog. So if you send us a post that you'd like us to share with our readership, I'll edit that with you and then we'll go on and share that. So please, if you have anything that you want to, you know, have introduced to our readership, send it my way and I will look over it with you.
That's right. We're always open to fresh content. And actually, this content was submitted really from one of our biggest fans, Mike Nasseri. So big shout out to you, Mike, who suggested that we speak to the innovator, Brianne Miller, who's the founder and CEO of Nata Market. And Brianne is actually a biologist, and so has been really focused on various issues relating to the environment. She's a big fan of the outdoors and lives in Vancouver, and is really passionate about all things food waste. And I saw in her bio on her website that sometimes she's, reminding her friends to clean up food waste or make use of it. So we're excited to hear a little bit more about that. So let's dive in and meet Brianne with our first question. So this is really about Nata Market. So why did you start Nata? And if you could tell us a little bit more about the work you're doing before Nata and the problems that inspired you to develop this specific solution.
Yeah, sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to share what we're up to in Vancouver and how we're supporting a more just food system through everything that we do. So in a nutshell, Nata is a package-free grocery store. So we enable our customers to bring in their own containers to refill with food. And we have a digital system to make that process a lot faster and more efficient. And a big part of what we're trying to do is to inspire people to change the way that they shop for groceries. So really trying to connect them to their food, teach people about where their food comes from, and on the other side of the coin, what happens when it gets disposed of. So tackling food waste and plastic pollution are two of our big problems that we're trying to tackle. And my background, like you said, is in marine biology. So I've worked as a marine mammal biologist. So I studied in the UK and did my master's there, and then have had a good few years working and traveling around the world after that. I've been really lucky to end up in Vancouver. That's actually what brought me into this city, was a job working as an environmental consultant in marine acoustics. So I was studying the impact of shipping noise on the endangered southern resident killer whale population here, which is a lot of really amazing work, a really interesting population to study. But I also have a background in terms of studying coral reefs and tropical fish. Have done a lot of community-based marine conservation around the world as well. And yeah, essentially it was, I've been really lucky to work in a lot of these places, a lot of them that have been super remote, everywhere from northern Quebec to Belize and Indonesia and everywhere in between. And I guess it just became very apparent very early on how global and widespread this plastic pollution problem is. It was really, you just can't turn a blind eye to it when you see it, especially when you're on a beach that takes hours to get to by boat or logging road or hike. And, a lot of these beaches seemingly are completely untouched by people, but when you go for a quick stroll, the amount of plastic that's on them is just eye-opening. And so what we're doing with Nata is really trying to tackle this problem at the source. We've learned so much, and the entire waste and recycling industry is something that's really interesting that we could touch on a little bit later. But we know now that only about 9% of plastic that's ever been produced has been recycled. So it's a lot lower than what we would actually think. And a lot of that ends up in the natural environment, either in landfills or on land or in the actual ocean itself. And so until we can actually turn off this tap of plastic production and plastic consumption, the problem really isn't going to go away. And so that's what we're trying to do with our store, is really encourage behavior change at a really grassroots and local level, and then kind of expand out from there.
Great. And I must say, I think that your background is fascinating. And I love what you're doing with the store Nada. And it's a very serious issue that I think we can all agree upon. So it's very cool to see people like you tackling this issue head on.
Yeah, it's definitely a big one. Affects people all around the world, but I mean, it's something we're trying to do is just be hopeful and keep a positive spin on things too, because it's the only way that you can really inspire change. And so, yeah, that's kind of a principle that we try to incorporate into everything that we do, is just educating, but also keeping it fun and exciting and interesting. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So you mentioned it a little bit in your introduction, but remind us again, what exactly is Nada and how does it work? How does it address the problems around this huge issue of packaging waste that you just talked about?
Yeah, for sure. So like I mentioned, Nada is a completely package-free grocery store, so no packaging at all. The idea is relatively simple. We encourage our customers to bring in their own containers to refill with food. So that can be anything that you have on hand. It doesn't need to be a pretty glass jar. It could be a Ziploc bag that you've used 10 times. It could be an old yogurt container or Tupperware, a cloth bag. Pretty much anything that you have on hand that can be reused at least one more time is a win in our books. So that's the first step, is encouraging our customers to bring in their own containers. And then when our customers walk into the store, we have a weighing or a tare station right at the front, which is essentially the one step of our grocery shopping experience that is different from any other store. So we have a digital system that enables our customers to tag their containers so that they're not paying for the weight of them when they check out. And it's kind of an all-encompassing area as well. So there are containers that we sell, and then we also have bins of free containers that other businesses and friends and family and community members have donated. So if someone comes into the store and they've never been there before, or they're just curious about what we're doing, or if it is someone even that comes in super prepared with their own containers and they need a couple more, we have quite a few bins of free containers that people can grab, and they've all just been sanitized and cleaned in our commercial dishwasher. And so we're just kind of giving a second life to those items as well. And then beyond that, we're pretty close to as full-fledged of a grocery store as you can get. We're like a medium-sized grocer, so it's about 2,400 square feet. We've got more than 750 products right now. And those range from everything from your standard bulk dry goods, things like baking ingredients, rice, beans, and legumes. We also have produce. And we have a baked goods section. We do a lot of deli items as well, which is a piece that's really exciting for us especially. Things like sauces and cheeses and dips and hummus and sauerkrauts and things like that are often really hard to get without packaging. So those items we can all dispense into customers' containers. And then we also have an edible liquid section, so customers can bring in their own containers or jars to refill with things like olive oil and honey, molasses, vinegar, those sorts of things. And then another really cool section that we have as well are toiletries and home care items. So things like cleaning supplies, shampoos, conditioners, soaps, deodorants, a whole bunch of things like that. And then we have a lot of kind of what we would call like zero waste essentials. A lot of these items people can find in their own homes already, but if they are looking for long lasting alternatives to single-use disposable plastics, we have a lot of things like stainless steel containers and straws and good stuff like that.
Well, that shop sounds amazing, and I think it's really cool that you actually get reusable containers from other businesses.
Yeah.
I was always wondering about the experience, like, wow, how inconvenient that must be to have to bring a container every time. But if you're kind of in the neighborhood and you've forgotten one, it sounds like you can still make use of the business, which I think is really clever, because there is this kind of, so many businesses use materials that they just throw out, and you're making use of them as well. And that I think is a unique idea I haven't heard about when it comes to these waste-free supermarkets or markets. So let's talk a little bit more about you and your journey. I think a lot of our audience are aspiring urban farmers and social entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And I think it'd be really interesting to hear how you made that transition from a very science-based work into something that's very entrepreneurial. What are some of the adjustments of that, and what are some of the key things that you learned in that experience, or maybe recommendations you have for entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was definitely quite the leap. I can't say I ever thought I would open a grocery store by any means. One of my first jobs in a small town in BC was actually working in a grocery store, and I hated it. I quit after 3 days. because I was working in a fridge and a freezer for most of the day, and I just really, really didn't enjoy it. So it's kind of ironic, but making that jump was definitely a bit of a work in progress. I had the idea quite a few years before actually really diving into it. So I'd been working full time for a couple of years at that point and kind of had this idea. I was really frustrated with the way that I was having to shop and just kind of running into all these hurdles in terms of trying to reduce waste in packaging, and also finding a place where you could get a lot of really awesome local foods as well. That's a big part of what our focus is on. And so ultimately I started kind of moonlighting, like working on this part-time while I was still working full-time in biology, and started testing the idea with pop-up shops. That was a big part for us to really learn and test the idea before investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into a retail space. Was really trying to get a sense of the market and if customers were ready to shop this way. We collected a lot of data along the way as well. So figuring out where customers were coming from, what containers they were bringing with them. The pop-up shops really were like a very mini version, like a minimum viable product for us, where we were testing things like pricing and products and building supplier relationships. So that was a big part of it that I started while I was still working in biology. And then ultimately decided to make the jump when I got accepted into a business accelerator program. So that was a big part of what we always try to do is surround ourselves by people that are smarter than us. Like you said, I do come from a completely different, completely science and academic based background. So there really was quite a bit to learn in terms of business and, everything from ops and logistics to HR and everything in between. That's actually one of the things that I really love about entrepreneurship is there's always something to learn, and so many people that are so keen to help, especially when you are starting something that's very impact or social enterprise based. So that would be one of my big tips, is always surrounding yourself with people that are smarter than you. And then I guess just kind of continued to go from there. Did more pop-up shops, did more markets, brought on more suppliers, more products, and started looking for a space really early on. Our first few pop-ups were super busy, and lots of people were really excited. We had lots of really good media attention in the beginning. And so we knew pretty early on that we would probably be able to sustain a retail store. And so it just took some time after that. Vancouver is really tricky to find retail space. So that took a while, but we just opened our doors a couple months ago.
I think those are some really great lessons there, especially like the one about piloting and gathering data, because I think that's also surrounding yourself with good people too, but I think those first ones are really applicable as well to the urban agriculture world. If you're looking, to start a farm, it's always smart to pilot, gather some data, make sure you know your market.
Yeah, absolutely.
So once you actually started Nada, and even, from the point where you were piloting up until present day, how have people reacted to your business? And I mean this kind of in two ways. One, on the consumer end, I think the idea is great. Have people always loved it? Have they always been shopping there? And then what about producers and suppliers? Was that tricky at all to, get the whatever you need in your store that's not packaged to then be able to sell? How do consumers and suppliers and producers all react to this?
Yeah. So on the customer side of things, people generally are super excited. I don't know what it is about this like zero waste or package free movement. Like, I think it's because people really can make a big difference with small everyday choices. It's just something that they gravitate towards. So the reception for this type of business model has been very positive right from the beginning, which was really nice to see. Vancouver itself is a really awesome, progressive city. We're really lucky to live in a place where there's ocean and mountains and fresh air. And so people really do have an inherent love of nature and, are kind of more inclined to protect it. And so the customer base in this area especially has been really drawn to a model like this, which is awesome to see. One of the things that we did in the beginning, kind of just, jumping off of the whole learning about your customer base thing, was we started online zero waste Facebook groups across the country. So in every major city across the country in Canada, we have a Zero Waste Toronto, Zero Waste Vancouver, Zero Waste Ottawa groups, and they're just meant as a forum for discussion for all things zero waste. And we've learned so much just from kind of, navigating those conversations. And we've seen those groups take off exponentially since the beginning. So it's really exciting to see the entire movement as a whole really start to take off. From the supplier side of things, It's a bit of a mixed bag depending on a couple different things. For us, it's actually been one of the easier things. We thought we'd have a lot more challenges in terms of getting products that are package free, but we're inherently working with a lot of businesses that are very values aligned to start with, a lot of really amazing food producers and urban farms and other local farms that are doing amazing things from an environmental perspective in their own businesses. So it's kind of a natural step for a lot of them just to start providing their products package free. Becomes a little bit trickier when you start to work with larger companies that have co-packers or work through distributors. The supply chain, you're just inherently adding more steps, so kind of more loops to jump through in terms of tackling packaging. But even with some of the larger, we work with everything from small one person businesses all the way up to the largest distributors that are supplying Whole Foods and everything in between. And with the larger ones, it's actually really amazing to see as well, because with larger companies, you can really influence huge amounts of waste that end up being diverted. So for example, we have one local distributor. We usually do, when we're ordering products, we do like a test run to kind of see what the baseline is in terms of packaging that comes to us. And then we just start the conversation from there. So with one local distributor, they had a lot of packaging in the beginning. We just kind of had the conversation about, especially because we're local, a lot of it was not necessary. And they've ultimately switched to paper bags just for us. So one single bag in bulk, which is amazing, can be recycled. And that's something that they're starting to do with a lot of their other local suppliers as well. And so it's kind of this, these conversations really are a caveat for a lot of these businesses starting to change things in their own supply chains as well.
Wow, Brianne, super cool. I've been loving all this information on food waste, reducing food waste in these markets, especially the idea, again, of piloting and doing these pop-ups. I can imagine the kind of attention that got and would get in a city like New York, for example. And you're right. I mean, Scott mentioned it, just for farmers, it's the same thing. You start with a pilot farm, you get your customers, you learn about it. So great advice for entrepreneurs. I'm also really interested in your strategy for setting up Facebook groups for all these cities around this topic of food waste. I mean, that's really clever and just a great tip for anybody who's looking to kind of do some DIY or low cost marketing and really understand your customer. So I guess that kind of also ties into your expansion strategy. What's next for Nada? You've got some really exciting press and some big periodicals, so you're probably getting attention and requests from other cities, I imagine. But, when are we going to see you come to New York? Maybe you can do a pop-up here in the agriculture office. But, what's next for you? Do you think you're going to come to the US anytime soon, or is it more focused on Canada? What's kind of the rollout?
Yeah, we definitely like to end up in New York really soon. It's true. We've gotten requests from all over the country, both Canada and the US, from people that are either starting stores like this or looking for help or asking if we're franchising, things like that. So that's amazing. The requests come in almost every day. It's really awesome to see how excited people are for a model like this. For us, we're definitely starting locally before we can even start thinking about franchising or opening stores beyond the Vancouver area. We definitely want to open a few more here first. It's definitely a good idea to get 5 or 7 locations under your belt before really starting to expand beyond that. So that's definitely our plan for the next few years, is really kind of fine-tuning and sussing out all the details of our own supply chain before moving beyond that geographically. But yeah, certainly, who knows, in a couple of years, we'll see where we end up.
Well, I certainly hope you end up here in a few years. I know I'll be one of your first shoppers. Also thinking about the future, do you have a vision for other changes that you think need to occur within the food system at large? And do you think that Nada could ever expand to address any of these other issues beyond just packaging food waste?
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, like you said, what we're trying to really accomplish with our stores is both the food waste and the packaging issues. The food waste conversation really ties into it as well. That's one of the big problems that we see with the grocery supply chain. Kind of right off the bat, is that a lot of food is not only is it packaged, but it's packaged in proportions that are conducive to having surplus food. So oftentimes things are packaged and it's just too much to eat for whatever reason. And so this type of model, by allowing people to bring their own containers, not only are you diverting one piece of container or packaging for every item that they're purchasing, but you're also enabling them to buy only what they need. a good example is cilantro. One of the things that drove me nuts with traditional grocery stores was cilantro, because you always had to buy it in this giant bunch. And how often does someone need an entire bunch
I
of cilantro?
completely agree, by the way.
Not very often.
All the herbs,
Yeah,
100%.
exactly. And so that's, that process we apply to many different products. So you can actually come into our store and buy a few sprigs of cilantro, and people are always excited too, because it's, it's only 15 or 20 cents to do that, as opposed to having to spend a couple dollars on a bunch that ultimately ends up in your compost or in the garbage. So I guess the other thing that I can touch on is essentially just a more just food system, one that is kinder to both the people and planet. So a food system that really supports people on farms, especially with industrial agriculture. There's a lot of reliance on really inexpensive labor. So really trying to drive changes, be it on the consumer side or the policy side or the government side or anywhere in between, just really push for different practices in terms of supporting a more just food system. For us, supporting a more just food system translates to supporting a more local food system. We think that's something that's really important. So we're working with well over 300 suppliers. The largest majority of them are local. They are from the Lower Mainland or the Pacific Northwest. And there are lots of advantages to that in terms of reducing your carbon footprint from transportation, keeping dollars in the local economy, creating local jobs, things like that. And so I think on a bigger picture scale, that type of thinking applied to a lot of big business is something that can drive a lot of change in the food industry. And I think it's something that needs to happen.
So at Agritecture, we're all about integrating agriculture into buildings and cities. And we obviously talk a lot about urban agriculture as a result of that. And, we're seeing a trend actually for urban farms to be integrated into all kinds of spaces, but supermarkets, especially, I think a lot of supermarkets are trying to transform the customer experience as they compete with the convenience of online. And so they have to make the supermarket almost a destination. Now, not a market, not a grocery rather, is unique in its own right relative to other supermarkets. But, we've got Smallhold, who's partnered with Whole Foods. They've set up a mushroom farm in their facility. Gotham Greens has a greenhouse on top of the Gowanus Whole Foods. We've got InFarm in Germany, who's partnered with Edeka and has about 100 of these units installed in various grocery stores. And certainly we get a lot of interest from companies and markets, especially curious about how to integrate this. Brianne, what do you think about these concepts? Do you think they're feasible? Do you think they make sense? Are they anything beyond the experience? And has NADA considered these? I know it's early for you, but as you think about the future of your business and your markets, have you considered even reducing, more impacts like food miles by having food production on site?
Yeah, absolutely. This is kind of like a funny point that I always thought about. My marine biology office was in a really awesome location in Vancouver, and it just overlooked all of these rooftops, and they were perfectly flat and always sunny. And I was always like, man, why is there not food growing on top of these? There's so much space. And so yes, it's definitely something that I think is a really amazing idea. It's certainly feasible. We've seen it in different cities all around the world. Montreal is another really amazing example of Lupa Farms. It's been done in Vancouver as well. And there's a lot of small grassroots initiatives that are really trying to focus on greening roofs and, getting farms and any sort of urban agriculture, everything from community gardens to community kitchens, lots of things like that we totally support. The whole 100-foot diet is kind of next level in terms of talking about food miles, and it's definitely possible. It's certainly something that we've thought of for our own store. We actually are in a really amazing LEED Gold certified building that's owned by the city, and there is actually gardens that are on the roof that are run by the Vancouver Native Housing Society, and so we're really excited to team up with them and see what that could look like going forward. Another big aspect of what we are doing with our space is actually opening a snack and smoothie bar in store as well. So the whole reason behind that was to actually tackle the problem of surplus food and trying to catch anything before it does become wasted. And just kind of closing that loop of food waste within our own store and turning things like carrot tops and things into pestos and sauces and dips and things like that. And so we actually do already have a lot of edible plants in our store kind of ready for that. So things like mint and lots of herbs and things like that are growing in planters on our walls. And then next spring, we're excited to add a patio to that as well. So we've got some good planter boxes and gardens and stuff in the works. But beyond that, we'd like to see what we can kind of tackle with those rooftop gardens.
It sounds like a dream destination for us, you know, Brooklyn hipsters interested in urban ag,
Yeah.
reducing food waste. And I can imagine, you know, having studied in Vancouver, in a crunchy city like that, it's also a great space and really responding to a lot of consumer needs. So I just really want to thank you, Brianne, for this interview today. You know, it's been really great speaking with you and inspiring to hear about your progress, and we certainly wish you the best. To our audience, we just want to say a big thank you again to Brianne Miller of Nada Grocery. You can learn more about Nada by going to nadagrocery.com. That's N-A-D-A grocery.com. And also follow Nada Grocery on social media. This has been another agritecture webinar with Brianne Miller from Nada Grocery. And thank you so much to Scott for helping us out today.
Thanks, everyone. It's great to chat with you this afternoon, too.
Thanks so much, Brianne.